Huge thank you to today's sponsor, Skillshare. More about them later. This is the Fosi Audio ZA3, and it is great. So instead of blah, 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 boring you with a regular video format about how it sounds, how it compares to other products, I want to give you 20 reasons why the Fosi Audio ZA3 is probably going to be amp of the year. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk about the ZA3. So of course we're going to talk about how it sounds between stereo mode and mono mode. But first let's just go over a few things. This comes in at $150 with the 48 volt 5 amp power supply. This is an amplifier. You hook speakers up to it. You can also get it with a 32 volt power supply. That comes in around $125, I think. There's also a 15% off coupon because this product is releasing today. We're going to get to how it sounds throughout my list of 20 reasons that this amplifier is awesome. But I had it hooked up to a variety of speakers. Well, not a variety, two. So I had it hooked up to the Sony SSCS5s initially. I also had the Geshelli Labs AKM 4499 J2 DAC going into the Geshelli Labs Arco 3 Pro headphone amp, acting as a preamp, going in balanced out of that headphone amp to the Fosi Audio ZA3. But I wanted to hook it up to something a little bit more traditional, fewer wires, something with a remote control, because I actually see this amplifier as being out in the wild, in a large room. Anyway, I had it hooked up to the Emotiva XDA3, which is a DAC, but really what it is a preamp. The Weem Pro was running source duties for not only the Geshelli Labs stack when I was running it, but also the Emotiva XDA3 when I was running it into the very hard to drive ELAC Unify 2.0. Probably the hardest speaker I have in the house to drive. Skillshare has everything you need to go from passion to paycheck and seed that side hustle. Skillshare classes are led by industry pros who have walked the walk, and there's an active community of members ready to cheer you on. And the first 500 people to click on the link below will get a free month trial to Skillshare. You know how much you can learn in a month? There's a bunch of different learning paths. You can teach yourself graphic design, grow your online business with marketing fundamentals. Skillshare has actually helped build my channel, The Chief Audio Man. This class really helped me out. Easily manage your creative projects. Because I have a lot of projects I need managing. So click on the link in the description because the first 500 people to use that link get a free 1-month trial to Skillshare. So invest in yourself. If there's anything that you need to learn for your business or yourself personally, chances are you can find it on Skillshare. And it's never been easier to give Skillshare a try. You don't have anything to lose. Worst case scenario, you learn something. Best case scenario, you have a new career. Thank you, Skillshare. It's cheap. Probably cheaper than taking 10 people to Chick-fil-A. By the time you get them the frosted lemonades and everything. Seriously, why is Chick-fil-A $12 a meal? Might as well go to Chili's. Highbrow dining at Chili's. $150 plus 10%. Here's the deal. Like almost always, there's a deal going on with Fosi Audio, Ayima, Weem. There's almost always a 10 or 15% off coupon code. So it's $150 right now. Amazon says a 10% off coupon, but I think I have a 15% off. If I do, it's going to be in the description. So that brings this thing down to $135. And this is the one with the 48 volt 5 amp power supply. The beautimous thing about this amplifier is you don't need to buy two initially. You can run this in stereo operation. So the only barrier to entry is either $135 if you're getting the more powerful one, or less than $135 if you're getting the one with 32 volt 5 amp power supply. You can add another one later. It's versatile. For the first time ever, we have balanced input and single-ended RCA input. How many inputs is that? Two inputs, which means you could run a DAC into one and a phono stage into the other. That's right, folks. Finally, we have an awesome sounding little Fosi audio amp that's built like a tank, and it has 2 inputs. So now, if you do things right, you only need one of these or 2 of these. It uses awesome parts inside. Japanese NCC capacitors, Japanese ELNA capacitors, German WEMA capacitors, Japanese Sumida inductors. And of course, the awesome, the amazing, the star of so many amplifier productions, the Texas Instruments 3255. Extremely powerful little amp chip, and if integrated correctly, well, you know what, even integrated poorly, this thing still sounds better than most Class D amplifiers. But when you implement it really well, like Fosi Audio has done already on the V3, and AIMA's done it really well on the A07 Max. Removable op amps. I guess technically, every amplifier that has an op amp in it can be removed. You can't always replace it. You probably could if you're really skilled. If maybe you're an electronics technician, you may be able to replace any op amp. This one has op amp receivers, which means you can just pull it out, pop another one back in, as long as you pop it in the correct direction. Otherwise, it's gonna go pop, sizzle, and no sound. Here's the cool thing about op amps. They're kind of like tubes, so you can roll the op amps. The cool thing about op amps is they're not terrible like tubes. And anybody says that you can't hear a difference in op amps is not changed out enough op amps. Point being, it sounds great out of the box, and it can sound better with better op amps. Personally, I like Sparco's op amps, so you can look at their offering. I also like some Burson op amps. You can look at their offerings. You can even look at just different Texas Instruments op amps. I'm sure that forums, the keyboard warriors will have many suggestions for you about how to improve the sonics with different op amps at every budget. It has got some serious horsepower under the hood. This amp can drive more speakers than an Amazon Prime truck. It's a bad joke. All right, stereo, we have 180 watts times 2 into 4 ohms. Mono, 235 watts times 1 at 4 ohms. With a 32 volt 5 amp power supply, you still get 95 watts times 2 into 4 ohms. Mono, 110 watts times 1 into 4 ohms. Even if you got the 32 volt power supply, you're still able to drive most speakers. And I drove the heck out of the ELAC Unify 2.0 speakers. Super dynamic, making it drop bombs. But stick with me, because there's definitely a sound difference, at least with the ELACs going from 1 amp to 2 amps. It's big. It uses the space really, really well. Look, you got some cool vents going on the side, and it's two-tone, right? So some people are not going to like the two-tone. Maybe some people just want it to be black. But at least it's got some design identity, and it's not just a black box. Nothing wrong with a black box. But if you want to look at the size comparison between the A07 Max, which also can be bridged, you'll see that there's a fairly large difference in size. Does that make a big difference sonically? I can't help but think it probably would. Maybe in a follow-up video I'll actually take this thing apart, because I do want to roll the op amps, but you've got a lot more real estate to work with the ZA3. And I think most importantly, you're getting cooling, very good cooling, because of the size, because of the heat sinks and all that good stuff. You can build around this, okay? Hear me out. So, you're starting out your hi-fi journey. You need an amplifier. Well, you can buy one of these, and you can drive 2 speakers in stereo mode. Then, when you save up a little money, you can buy another one of these and run them in mono mode. And then, when you save up some more money, you can change out the op amps. And then if you save up more money, you can change out the power supplies. If you can spend the extra 20 bucks, I would just go ahead and get the 48 volt 5 amp power supply in the beginning, because in the long run, it's actually going to be cheaper than if you buy it with the 32 volt and then you upgrade to the 48 volt anyway. But you can start with one and build up your system later. Running this in mono with the ELAC Unify 2.0s, I was dropping bombs. I was listening to this in the 90s with peaks going above 95 dB in the near field. So I'm only about 3 or 4 feet away from the speaker. But that's still loud. And I had this full tilt, so I had the volume knob all the way up till the end. The Unify 2.0 is a great speaker if you give it enough juice and if you have the right amplifier. I was a little bit concerned that this was just going to be too thin. Now I will say when I was running it in stereo, it wasn't nearly as dynamic as when I was running it in mono, and that makes sense, right? More power, more dynamics, hard to drive speaker. Thing about the Unify 2.0s is they're $419 right now on sale. It used to be a $650 speaker. They do require a huge amount of break-in. So when you first get them, they're going to sound fairly flat. If you give them enough time though, or I guess if you get used to the sound signature, they do loosen up, get punchier on the bottom, a little more exciting on top. I'm so glad I brought these out because I forgot how good they are. They soundstage and image great. Like in the near field, man, you just have stuff right in front of you, a little bit higher. It's great. Great speaker, really good speaker. Huge soundstage, great imaging, which tells me that the power supply is pretty solid here. Granted, I had the ELACs on here. They soundstage and image wonderfully, but I did not feel like this was closed in. That's why I cannot wait to get the Sparkos on here because it's going to give an even immersive, larger experience. But got a big old stage. Most of my listening was done in mono, okay? In stereo, I was hearing about the same, I don't know, maybe a little bit bigger than the A07 Max. This is a really good amp, okay? But I only have one of these, so I could only listen to this one in stereo. Anyway, Fosi plays big and wide. Way more dynamic than the Fosi Audio V3. I love this amp, but the ZA3, even in stereo, to me, sounds a little bit more dynamic. In mono, it sounds a lot a bit more dynamic. I feel like you're getting all of the clarity with the V3, but now you just have more bottom end, but you still have the same amount of clarity. Like the Fosi Audio BT20A Pro, more bass on the bottom end, less clean. Still a great amp, just less clear. You don't have that real microscope, magnifying glass looking into the music with the BT20A Pro as you do with the V3. And now you have not only the clarity into the music, now you got a little bit of punch you in the face, slap you with a fish. I like to be slapped in the face with a fish. You can crank it up and not worry about clipping. I was a little bit worried that this thing would clip if I had it full tilt. It didn't. Oh, this is a pretty short one. Doesn't clip. It's built well. To be fair, all these amplifiers are really kind of up in their game. But this has aluminum, unobtainium. No, just kidding. It's very obtainium. Anyway, I almost dropped it. Matte finish, aluminum chassis. Got the signature orange knob, which you push it in to turn on the power, and then you let it out. And then you just rotate it. They're stepping up. Okay, one complaint about this, about the only complaint, binding posts. So we have this beautiful package, phenomenal sound, very versatile, and then you have these same little kind of crappy, cheap binding posts. Even IEMA is figuring out to get better binding posts on here. So I feel like this is the one thing that they kind of dropped the ball on. You also have a trigger input, which I'm going to use here in a little bit because a lot of preamps will automatically turn on your power amp, so you can turn this on remotely or just leave it on all the time. That's what I generally do. Bridging isn't complicated like on the D300 from SMSL. Only thing you have to do on this is when you're bridging it, you put both inputs into the right input. You take the right output from your preamp or source or whatever it is, put it into the right input on this, and then hook up your speaker to the right speaker output, and then you do this. And that's it. Put it to you this way. I figured out how to put this and drive this in mono the first time. The D300, I had to read the manual about 45 different times, and it was kind of in terrible English, so I still didn't get it to work. Finally, after about the 10th time of just fumbling around with stuff, I got it to work. Then you take the left channel from your preamp or source, run it into the amp that's going to drive the left speaker, but hook it up to the right input. either RCA or XLR. And Bob's your uncle. Another great thing about this amplifier, it has no remote. No remote, you say? That's a good thing? Yes, it's a good thing, because when you have two amplifiers and you have one remote and you get the volume set just perfectly on things, and you start to mess with the remote, you start to mess with that center image. That was the big issue with the SMSL A300 when I had those bridged. I guess if you put both of them at full tilt and then you're using the remote control on a preamp, then it doesn't really matter. But I see this more as a power amp. And that's the second complaint I have. Just give us a switch to bypass the volume. Just a switch on the back that bypasses the volume and doesn't do anything. I think the topping LA90 has something like that. But that way, it's just a power amp. We don't have to worry about it. And that's really what I'm going to be using this thing as anyway. This thing would be absolutely perfect if it had better binding posts and it had a switch to disengage the volume. Other than that, it's perfect. This thing completely owned the ELAC Unifies. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I didn't feel like I needed to go grab my XPA Gen 3 that puts out like 300 watts. The ZA3 was doing it, and it was doing it in a way that it wasn't like flat and chalky, digitally on top, no dynamics, sounded like an old TV speaker that was just like mid-range. That's what a lot of older Class D amplifiers sounded like. This does not. This has dynamics, this has clarity, this has soundstage, this has power, and it does it all for $135. So for $270, you're putting out some serious power. The size is also awesome. One of my favorite products this year was the Skit Sin. Basically a multi-channel preamp. You could get, well, 5 of these if you wanted. But what I would probably do is get maybe 3 of these, left, center, right, and then 1 for the rears. And that would be fun. So that's about it. Amazing amplifier. I think it sounds a little bit better than the AO7 Max. AO7 Max sounded really good though. I can't say that it's like better. I mean, I think probably the heat dissipation is better. I think this has better binding posts, obviously. This also has a subwoofer output on it, which is kind of cool. I didn't really test that out. I'm sure it works fine. You have to understand though that I was never using this as the volume. I was never using the volume control on this. So I either had the Arco 3 Pro doing volume duties, or I had the Emotiva XDA3 doing volume duties. I still kind of feel like Fosi Audio is trying to kind of be everything to everyone, but I think they really need to start leaning into, this is a power amp with volume control, but you can bypass it. I mean, the subwoofer thing's good though. Subwoofer thing's good. It's good. 9.5 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10. It would be a 10 out of 10 if it had better speaker binding posts and then a volume bypass. But it's a revelation. It's amazing to see what Fosi used to be. They were fine. I mean, they're like Duke Audio. They were like IEMA. But now Fosi is like Fosi. And it's getting difficult for others to compete. IEMA closely behind Fosi Audio. Fosi's starting to pull away, I think. Couldn't recommend this amplifier enough. Probably gonna win Amp of the Year. There's another amp out there that maybe win, but that video is gonna come out soon. So if you've made it this far, just subscribe and like this video. If you want to support the channel, you can do all the things. Sign up for Patreon. Give me a couple bucks. Buy me a cup of coffee. Don't feel compelled to buy me anything. Use the links in the description. These will be affiliate links. Don't spend a ton of money on hi-fi. Buy yourself ZA3 and then buy yourself another Fosi Audio ZA3. Bridge them, have a whole bunch of power, and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.